What's up, you guys? My name is Grace Lauren Taylor, and you are listening to episode 27 of the Trauma Dump Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Here at the Trauma Dump Podcast, we seek to answer the question, what is mental health? How do I take care of my own, and how do I support others? This week, we will be discussing the topic of why language matters with our very special guest of the week, Griffin. Be sure to go check them out on Spotify and on TikTok. Their amazing Spotify is Sapa, and then their TikTok is Words at Work. So please go check out Griffin on Spotify. Their content is awesome. They have some funky music. It's really silly, and I really appreciate it. It's very memey. So if you like memey music, go check out them on Spotify. Remember, if you'd like to share on the show, please message us in the podcast Discord channel along with your unique experiences, and we will match you to the right episode. Just a quick disclaimer before we start, I'm not a licensed health professional. This podcast only seeks to create community and further understanding of difficult topics that are so often overlooked and extremely misunderstood. If you or a loved one are in need of medical professional help, we have resources in our description. The topics discussed here are for a mature audience, so viewer discretion is always advised. So, words, vocalizations, communication. Words are what we use to describe the world around us. Our language is extremely important, and it's also very important when we talk about our mental health, how we're feeling, how we're doing, what's going on around us. So today we are discussing language, and not just language, why we communicate, but how we can communicate more effectively when discussing our mental health. In the context of mental illness, mental health, and well-being, negative words can be experienced as condescending, isolating, and stigmatizing, whereas positive words can convey dignity, empathy, and hope. Words can transmit stigma. Studies have shown that people with psychiatric and/or substance abuse disorders often feel judged outside and inside the healthcare system. This can lead them to avoid, delay, or stop seeking treatment altogether for their mental illness. The way that we talk about people with behavioral disorders can change lives in either a positive or negative manner. Used in a constructive manner, language can have substantial impact on people's lives. In the context of mental health and mental illness and well-being, negative words can be experienced as condescending, isolating, and stigmatizing, whereas positive words can convey dignity, empathy, and hope. Today, we are discussing why language matters when talking about our mental health and how we can promote compassion and understanding when communicating more effectively.
Okay. Vibes. Hello. Welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Hey, I am doing amazing. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, it's really good to be here. How are you?
I am alive. We have a new puppy. Her name is Mochi. I have been woken up at every hour on the hour to go let her out to go pee.
Oh,
And I just took her out and I waited for 15 minutes. I'm just like walking her around. As soon as we come back inside, what's she do? She pees.
ah, ah. Well, it's part of the magic, I guess. My condolences, but I'm sure you'll get along swimmingly, ultimately.
Like, I really hope so. She's a blue healer.
Oh,
So she's
yeah.
a lot of energy. It's too much. I'm working through it, but I'm just like,
I'm sure. Yeah, that sounds like a lot. Are the blue healers, is that the dog that Bluey is?
yes. Here, let me
Okay,
grab
nice.
her. Hold on. You're gonna see. She's just like Muffin. Hold on.
Oh
Mochi!
my God. Oh my God. Oh, Mochi is adorable.
This is Mochi. If you've ever seen Bluey, Mochi acts just like Muffin.
Wow.
So she's always screaming and wiggling and just trying to cause chaos and destroy
can't blame her.
everything.
That's
Okay.
awesome.
So that's why she's outside. So before we start the interview, I just want to address your pronouns, how you would wish to be referred to.
Yeah, thank you. I any pronouns are cool with me. I usually go by they them, especially in online, but yeah, that's me. Thanks for asking. And what about you?
I'm also they them.
Sweetness.
It's a vibe. It's a vibe. So
Mhm.
are you comfortable with sharing your personal experiences?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, great. But to make sure I'm not crossing any of your boundaries and respecting your experiences, please feel free to interrupt me at any time. If you feel uncomfortable or triggered, we can also take a break at any time. And if you don't feel like answering a question, just tell me to skip it, okay? I'm not going to get offended because my priority is to make sure you feel comfortable.
Awesome. Well, that's very sweet of you. Thank you.
So you told me earlier in like the DMs that you're a linguistics dude by trade. What is linguistics, if you'd like to
Yeah,
share with us?
totally. What? Yeah, that's a great question. I find myself answering that myself every day. Yeah, so just to clarify too, I guess I'm certainly no professional linguist, but linguistics is like it's been my passion for years and years. Like the study of language is the most baseline definition I would give for it, but I think it encompasses a lot, which is why I love it so much. And part of what it encompasses, it's everything from like the individual sounds coming out of your mouth and like the like how you form different sounds coming out of your mouth, all the way into like the way that words have meaning in the context of a conversation and the context of who's in the conversation, the implications of a word that you're using or the lack of a word that you're using or what's being unsaid here. So it gets very abstract on both ends of it, but it encompasses a lot. So that's linguistics, I would say. I'm a big fan.
Very cool. So would you consider yourself a nerd?
Oh, heck yeah, totally.
Heck yeah. Sorry, my voice is going in and out because I've been screaming at Mochi for like
Ah,
days.
I don't blame you. Seems like a process.
It is the process. I actually also have a service dog named Gigi who is also outside because if I leave Gigi in here with me, Mochi will literally eat the door.
Wow.
Yeah, she
Hey, well,
started eating doors and walls and shoes. Does she have an abundance of toys? Yes.
but the door, it's just
But the
so.
door is just like the creme de la creme. Anyway, but so although it's often overlooked, the language that we use to convey our thoughts, feelings, facts, and information is very important. When speaking to someone who may be experiencing difficulties with their mental health, we need to be attentive with what we say. And according to my research, we got to think before we speak. And I've been told that my entire life, but also like to actually read it when I'm doing my research for this episode,
Mhm.
I was like, been called
Yeah,
out all my
I
life.
know. I feel you for sure. I feel you for sure. I wish being in linguistics made it easier to do that, but it doesn't, for sure.
No, no. And I've been in theater my entire life. I have two
Oh
theater
yeah.
degrees. Um, we deal a lot with sounds, language, communication, body, everything. And even still, I have to often correct myself when I'm being a bit intrusive to my friends and those around me because really in theater, it's like the only boundary is like no. Usually there's hardly, if any, boundaries. And
Mm,
so I've had to unlearn a lot of theater stuff because I've been in it since I
yeah.
was 3. So like
Wow.
20
Yeah.
years. And I'm just like, I'm done. I'm out. Peace, guys.
Totally.
And it's been a journey of unlearning and relearning how to effectively communicate my own boundaries, especially when it comes to too much information. Because I do often spill too much information. That's why it's called the Trauma Dump
Coming to
Podcast.
podcast. Right. Right. Right.
Because when I was going through a lot of trauma, now for the past 3 years, I have experienced immense trauma. Now, I mean like a lot.
Yeah.
Lost my dad, grandpa, my other grandpa, my ESA Clark Kent,
Oh my
my
God.
aunt, all within the span of a year and a half.
Dang.
It's like a mess,
Yeah.
wipe
That's
out.
that's a lot. That is a lot.
It is a lot. And I was also homeless for 4 months because my mother, who forced me to move out of my apartment in Lubbock, mind you, I was living on my own. She was like, I need your help to figure out your dad's finances because he owned 3 companies. And she's like,
Wow.
I need your help. It's like, oh, fine. Vibes. I'll come help. Because
Yeah.
I was always told, show your name. Your name means grace, undeserved love and kindness. Show
Yep.
your name. So I came. I paid like $1,800 to get out of my lease, even though my mother was a guarantor on my lease and she signed papers saying she wouldn't be a guarantor. So my rent was about to go up.
Oh my God.
So I was like, okay, peace out. I'm out. I moved all of my stuff to Dallas, from Lubbock to Dallas.
Wow.
And only for within 2 weeks, my mother to curse me out every single day, like almost every hour, scream at me, yell at me, everything, for her then to make me homeless and living in my car.
Goodness gracious. Yeah.
It's a vibe. Oh my God. And
That's
so
intense.
I say this with like the utmost humor when it comes down to it, because I'm in such a better place since then.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that she like didn't want anything to do with me, because I would not be where I am today. But a lot of people who are experiencing trauma, who are in the thick of it, cannot recognize within themselves that they will eventually be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of our generation is becoming more trauma informed, more conscious of other people's emotions than any other generation. And I think it's extremely important. And something that's extremely important is to also figure out how we can talk about these things with one another without hurting each other's feelings or without implying that there's something wrong with another person.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So, for those of you listening, if you want to talk to someone about their mental health, here's like a couple questions you can ask that will not like be perceived, which also tone matters, but will not be perceived in a negative connotation. So questions like, how will, these are questions you need to ask yourself, okay? So how will someone perceive this once they hear or read this? Am I communicating in an open, respectful, and non-judgmental way? Am I acknowledging someone's right to be different from me? And how are the words that I have chosen a reflection of my attitude to this subject and or person? Before you communicate something to someone, these questions need to be asked within ourselves. I have to do it all the time, being like, okay, Grace, is what you're saying speaking life to this person or speaking death to this person?
Mm. That's a great way to
Because
think about it. Yeah.
it's super, super important. When I was going through a lot of trauma of my dad dying and I was in college and I wanted to talk to someone, anyone, like what I was going through, I remember this guy in my class telling me that everyone has problems, Grace. It's like, okay.
Wow. Yeah.
And then another time that completely shut me down, number
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
another time he was in my apartment. Now, mind you, he was friends with my roommate at the time. He was in my apartment and I was in my own room. My door was open. My room was next to the living room. I was in my own room and I was talking to my boyfriend at the time about my dad's prognosis. And I said, I don't understand why I'm losing all of my friends. This guy comes into my room
Oh my God.
and says, no one wants to be attached to a sinking ship, Grace.
Oh, jeez Louise. Yeah. What a,
So,
with all due respect, what an asshole. I don't know if I'm
yeah,
allowed to say that, but what a,
we can say any word we want on here.
okay. Yeah, that guy sounds like a total asshole. I'm sorry. Jeez
Yeah,
Louise.
it was crazy.
Yeah.
But I say this with like, I don't know his intention. I'll never know his intention. That's fine. I don't need to know his intention.
Mm-hmm.
But what he said to me has still reside within my being, within my sense of self
I'm sure.
to
Right.
this
Yeah.
day. And that was 2020. So that was a while ago. And
Yeah.
it's still within me. So your words matter. And my first question to you would be, as someone who is studying like language and has
Mm-hmm.
a platform where you describe the history of a word and help other people understand that use of the word, what would be your saying to those of us listening about why our language matters?
Ooh, yeah. Hey, great question. You know, it's something I think about a lot. And I think language is very interesting as a topic because I think it's something that everyone speaks a language, right? Or uses a language to, whatever extent. Everyone has familiarity, a deep familiarity with at least one language. So people think that, they know exactly what's up, right? If I'm talking to a native English speaker, I myself was raised speaking English, right? And I think it's easy to assume, well, I know English like the back of my hand. I know what's going on. I know the intention of these words. I know what these words. I have an underlying sense of what these words mean. I don't need to know the history. Like I just know. Um, but language is always changing. It's very fluid. And the reason that's crucial, there's a concept I find very interesting called the euphemism treadmill, which is it's kind of a fun name for it. But basically, what happens is that you'll have a subject that's for whatever reason is taboo. Mental health, for example, is historically very taboo because it's often so stigmatized. So you'll have a label will be used within that's like the respectful meaning, for something that's theoretically taboo. It's like to deflect from the thing itself. To bring it outside of mental health, just to give us some context, and then I'll dive back in. But so, for example, the word toilet, right, is a euphemism for the bathroom, the place where you shit, which is like what we're all saying. But you wouldn't just say, "Oh, I'm gonna go take a shit." Sometimes that's maybe not appropriate to say, or maybe it would convey something a little like maybe a tone that you're not trying to use in a certain circumstance. So you would say, "Oh, well." Like toilet, if I'm not mistaken, used to refer to like I forget if it was either like the bathrobe or something, some component of the bathroom, not the bathroom itself, but it was a euphemism. And now toilet itself is kind of like like kids will giggle if you say toilet, so sometimes you'll say washroom or powder room or something like that, and it just keeps going because the term you come up with to replace the taboo one becomes taboo. Now to bring that to mental health, you see this all the time. I think the R slur is probably a really like kind of classic example because that was like the politically correct term for something in the 1970s that's since become very derogatory. But even like words that we think of as somewhat innocuous, but like moron or idiot or words like that, or imbecile even, which when I hear imbecile, I'm like, oh, that's like an old timey insult. But that used to be, all of those used to be like clinical medical terms for mental illness. Which is, and obviously now they're just like, oh yes, you know what I mean? It's a little insidious, but what sorry, this is a very roundabout answer to your question, but I just wanted to cover a lot of bases. I think the reason I think linguistics taps me into how important it is, how important word choice is, because I think everyone has a certain responsibility to keep up with that, like deflecting and saying, "Oh, well, back when I was in the '80s, this was the appropriate term." But there's at the very best, that's willful ignorance because it's kind of these things happen. It's a pretty regular process, but you can also get a sense pretty easily if you're not living under a rock how these terms come to be used and also the way that you're using them. Like an old hospital worker, but if you're like saying if someone does something silly and you use a slur related to mental illness to them, I don't think you can deflect that by saying it was the '80s, it was a different time. It's like, well, you know what you were doing. So that word choice is important, effectively. I don't know if that answers your question fully, but that's how I feel about it.
It does. Oh, my voice is really low today. Yeah, it definitely does. Because, for example, hysteria is
Yeah.
often a term that used to describe an emotionally discharged behavior that seems like really excessive and out of control. Okay, hysteria is actually one of my favorite words, because that was what I was called my entire childhood by my mother. Now,
Wow.
she means it in
Yeah.
a very horrible connotation. She has diagnosed bipolar disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. But she has called me hysterical since I was like little dude.
Yeah.
Since I was a little dude. And so I delve into that word as a child. I have dyslexia. And so I had to do first grade twice. 'Cause I can't read in the same way that most people can, right?
Yeah.
I memorize the way that words look, and then I'm like, okay, I'm trying to sound it out, but that's why English is very hard for me, because it's like, anyway, I'm gonna get back to hysteria. So hysteria is a term to describe someone who is out of control, but it's like hysteria, hysterical. If someone's being disproportionately emotional for the situation, it's often described as being hysterical. But during the Victorian era, the term hysteria was a common medical diagnosis, especially for women, but it was removed from the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, in the 1980s. So hysteria is colloquially used to mean ungovernable bleh, emotional excess that can refer to a temporary state of mind or emotion. In the 19th century, female hysteria was considered a physical diagnosis in women. So what was the cure for hysteria? Touching a woman and making her orgasm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's not a thing, but okay. But so in the 20th century, it's now considered like bipolar disorder or something to that effect. But the word hysteria originates from the Greek uterus, or hysteria, which is the oldest record that dates back to 1900 BCE, when the Egyptians recorded behavioral abnormalities in adult women on the Kahun papyrus. I think I'm saying that right. If I'm not, I'm sorry, guys. But Egyptians attributed the behavioral disturbances of a wandering uterus. So basically, they're like, oh, your uterus is moving all over in your body, and therefore you're acting crazy. What?
It doesn't get much better than that. Yeah, it's go figure. So that's a professional, that was a professionally used term for so long, and yeah, like it's fascinating. It's fascinatingly messed up, really. But yeah, hysteria is a very interesting word in my opinion as well, for that exact reason. It's just like so loaded.
Yeah. And it's also the first medical disorder attributed to women.
Oh wow, really? Yeah, okay. Go figure. And that's that. Yeah. Yeah. That's
It's crazy. But like I've done so much research on like the word hysteria, and there's like hysteria machines, which are basically like sex toys. Like doctors would use on women. I'm not
Wow.
kidding, guys. It's
Wow.
insane.
Whew.
It's
That's
real.
funny.
It's so real because they're so I hate to say, but it's so dumb. It's
Yeah,
it is so dumb. Like
it's very interesting.
they would attribute a woman acting irrationally, which here's sorry if I flick things. I'm crazy. But here's the point. When people seem to act irrationally, that is not irrational for the person who is acting in the way in which they are acting. That is not irrational in any way, shape, or form in their own mind. And it may seem irrational to those around them because they don't understand what's happening. And I think it's really, 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 and I cannot emphasize this enough, really important if you see someone who you think is acting in a manner at which is inappropriate for the time, the space, the occasion, what have you, please treat them with kindness. And I am very disabled in many different ways, but I go to a mental health clinic every couple months, and it's completely free in Dallas, and it's free for low income people. And so there's people of all sorts there. So I was there yesterday, and there was a man with schizophrenia, and he was screaming. He was getting up. He wasn't hurting anyone. Okay. He just saw things, and he was trying to talk to what he saw. I am so happy that no one disturbed him. Now, again, I have a service dog, Gigi, so Gigi was right with me the entire time. Gigi is so well trained that she did not move, did not bark, did not do anything with the man. The man came right up to us, screamed in our face. We did not move. We did not have a reaction because he is going through it. Now, he went in, he got whatever injection that he needed. I'm pretty sure it was an injection because he had like something on his arm to cover it up. He was completely returned to what his normal state would be of just calm. He apologized to everyone. He was like, I'm so sorry. And no one was like, oh, you shouldn't have done this, whatever. I can't say normal because it was his semblance of normal.
Right.
What
right,
is
right.
normal for one person may not be normal for another person, but he went back to homeostasis and he was okay and he left. Words really do matter. The words that we use to describe mental illness and substance abuse disorders or addiction to alcohol, other illegal drugs, or illicit drugs can impact the likelihood that that person will seek help and the quality of the help that they receive. If we stigmatize someone who is suffering, because that man was definitely suffering, if we stigmatize those of us who are suffering, they're less likely to get any help at all. And they are less likely to get help that is quality help. They may settle for just subpar, right? Like it's so important, like now more than ever, for us to recognize that our words have meaning. I was talking about so for the way I record these episodes, I record the intro and the outro at the same time before I do the interview. It makes it a little easier for me to edit things.
Yeah, for sure.
And I have a wheel of emotions back here, and it landed on interested. For
Oh,
those of you listening, if you want to like stay tuned for like the wheel of emotions segment, it'd be great. But within that, I was talking about, there was a study that was done when you speak joy, compassion, understanding to water, it retains its purity.
oh
But when you
yeah,
speak
yeah.
anger, resentment, hatred to the water, it starts to corrupt and mold and gross forms. What do you think on that? Well, what is your perspective on speaking life versus speaking death?
Yeah. Oh, I remember seeing that article, Sam, about the speaking of water. I still have no idea how to interpret that. That like shakes everything. I'm like, I don't have nearly the skill set even to interpret that, but it seems extremely interesting. I can talk about people, which it's interesting you bring that up because to drop another like cool term I think is interesting. There's this idea called associative activation in linguistics, and I think it's a psychology term as well. That I'm not too well versed in, but linguistics I can at least cover. But so as far as speaking life versus speaking death, which is a great way of putting it, I think. So I appreciate that from you as well. It's funny. So you mentioned like there's I think even into today there's various aspects of mental health that are so stigmatized, but even that the fact that they're weaponized, right? Like if someone was doing something really unkind or doing something horrible, even like I feel like a lot of people, if you were to be like, oh, this person's psychotic, people wouldn't like, obviously that's pretty problematic way of going about it, but I think a lot of that's even still a little normalized, I think, in discourse, and that I still hear that a lot personally. Or even like I think references like schizophrenia are still very common, even though there's been more awareness of that, I think. But the reason I bring that up, what I mean by associative activation is that there have been some studies into this as well. It's if I were to say, for example, if you were talking to a kid, and every time you see someone doing something, horrible or mean or unkind, something you really disapprove of, and you say, "Oh, this person is psychotic," for example. Now the word psychotic, your frame of reference for that word, or that, or like the idea of like a psychopath or and you know how that's used in the news, right? It's just like someone who did something really horrible. Well, okay. That is like that just keeps strengthening the connection in your brain, or one's brain, not your brain specifically, but like in the person's brain, to like, okay, this word is like bad. The same thing with like if every time someone messes up you call them an idiot, that word has, the word idiot has zero connection to the medical field now. It has a history in the medical field, but no one is using it as a clinical term because that's same with the R slur, same with, and there's so many examples of this, but that's why I think even just using kinder words is important. It does matter. And speaking life to things, it really does have an impact because that those associations are huge. And if instead of just going to like the baseline, like, you know, oh, this person's an idiot, for example, instead of maybe just like, I always try to like call out exactly what they're doing and like why I'm disappointed in them, rather than just like going right for them. You know what I mean? I try to, and I'm far from perfect in that way either, but like that's how I try to think about it, especially as a linguist. But I'm like, instead of saying, oh, this person's an idiot, or this person's just so fucked up, like whatever, I try to be like, wow, that was a really fucked up thing to do. That was a really, you know, that they, you know, I don't know. I try to target the behavior itself and let them be judged by their behavior, rather than attach, you know, because you can, if someone does something horrible, you can judge them by their behavior pretty easily. That's my spiel on that
I
personally, but I think
appreciate your
that's a great way of putting
spiel.
it. Yeah.
I appreciate it. And I want to mention that you are here to speak. This is a podcast. I like to hear you speak.
Appreciate it.
So don't ever apologize for going off on a tangent or roundabout. It's just the way that your brain works. Your brain is beautiful and it's doing amazing things. So vibes, you're doing great. But to go off of what you were saying, yeah, there's so many words in our vocabulary that used to be in like the medical field. A big one right now is narcissist. So many people are calling someone that does something selfish or self-centered
Yeah.
narcissistic. As someone who has a narcissistic mother, please, for the love of God, everyone listening, please stop using narcissist in your vocabulary. Someone who has the diagnosis of narcissism is extremely insecure. Okay. Most of these people that they talk about as narcissists are very self-centered and very confident in their like self-centeredness and their worth. People who have narcissism, it's quite the opposite. Those that get a diagnosis of narcissism, they're very insecure. They have extremely insecure attachments, and they tend to sabotage the attachments that they do have in favor of what they think will be better, which then sabotages them again and again and again. And it's not great. But narcissism is like another thing that people overuse to the point where it's nauseating, which is like another drawback to us talking about mental health, because people learn these terms, but they don't actively learn the terms. They get a little picture of, hey, this is what this means, this is what I correlate it to, and it's not entirely accurate. It's the same thing with other mental illness like descriptions, like being like manic depression. Manic depression is no longer a diagnosis. It was officially changed to bipolar disorder in the DSM-3. So consideration and similar adjustment could also apply to terms like schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. The word schizo is often used as a derogatory and offensive term, and altering language can notably contribute to reducing stigma. And what is stigma, guys? What is stigma? Because we keep saying that word. Stigmatizing language in mental health refers to the use of words in terms that imply negative judgment or stereotypes about people with mental illness or substance abuse disorders. So if we use terms like, oh, that guy is psychotic, oh, that man is a narcissist, oh, she's so bipolar, these terms lead to stigma because it's what we associate the erratic behavior. Is what I'm going to say. The erratic behavior, we associate it with a diagnosis, which I'm not a mental health professional. You're not a mental health professional. We don't have any right to diagnose people. We didn't go to school for it. We can learn about these things and educate ourselves and thereby start to educate other people. But I don't have any right to diagnose someone as like, oh, if they're picking their skin or they're having some anxious behavior, as they have anxiety or they have panic disorder. That's not my expertise. It also, saying these things can discourage others from seeking or receiving treatment. So to reduce stigma, it's really important that we use scientifically accurate and respectful language that it focuses on the experience of people rather than like what we perceive them to be doing. And so that's my little tangent. But
Great tangent. Yeah, for
thanks.
sure.
It's important. It's really important.
I
I'm
do.
gonna ask you this question because I ask
Yeah.
every guest this question.
Hit it.
What do you think of the saying, "I transmute my pain into purpose"?
Banger. Total banger. Yeah, I think it's a really good one. I think it's I feel like it's you were just talking about stigma and stuff. I feel like even maybe pain itself is maybe yeah, stigmatized, I think, or that like even just being vulnerable, or to experience pain, to we say to wallow in it is seen as something so horrible. Um and I think it's I don't think it's maybe an inherently, obviously pain comes from really negative experiences, but I think it's to experience pain shouldn't be something shameful at all. To wallow in it and to grow from it is a very difficult process, I think. And one that should really be commended, but I don't think it should be so I'd like to think we're moving that the direction. I have my doubts about it. I think people are just mean in different ways as the years go on, and they have different tools available to them and language available to them. But I'd like to think we're maybe moving in a direction that lets people be a little bit more vulnerable. That may be a very gentle change, but yeah, I think it's a great saying. I think it's a really, really, really cool idea.
Thank you. My grandmother would say it to me very
Hmm.
occasionally. Um, I love my grandma, my mom's mom. I also love my Mimi, my dad's mom. Um, they're both really great ladies, but they're very great in very different ways.
Hmm.
My grandmother is extremely empathetic, sympathetic, um, very compassionate, but I would say weak. Weak would be a good way to describe her. Now, I'm
Hmm.
not saying this in a negative connotation, but physically, she's
Hmm.
very weak. Um, it's very hard for her to leave the house. It's very hard for her to, then this has been my entire life of knowing her. Whereas my Mimi is extremely strong, very resilient, very courageous. She's very loving, but very closed off.
Hmm.
Um, and it's very interesting to me the way that these women were raised, very, very different, very individualistic. I learned a lot from both of them, but my Mimi would always tell me was to stop being a drama queen, calm down, chill out. You're doing a lot, which she grew up in a very rich, wealthy Jamaican household. She had servants in Jamaica. She's a mixed race woman. And then my grandmother grew up in a very poor American household, didn't have a lot. She was the oldest of two girls, was subjected to a lot of torture and harm and a lot of sadness. And so my grandmother fully expresses her emotions, whereas my Mimi was never allowed to. And so thereby she tells me not to. But they're both growing. I've noticed my Mimi is more accepting of what I do here. She is starting to recognize the change in me of actually being able to express myself and how that's a good thing versus now my grandmother, whereas she didn't really know me a lot growing up because my mother would not let her. I'm not going to get into that, but she knows me now. And she is also now fully expressing what she went through to me and hoping that one day I can share what she's gone through when she says once she's gone, share what she's gone through and use that for good and transmute all of that pain into purpose. And I don't know, it means a lot to me that I have these two wonderful women in my life, and I hope that they will continue to live much longer. But their two different perspectives on mental health are very like drastic, very individualistic.
Yeah.
And I think it has culminated in making me very compassionate. And I think it's helping me, which their pain I'm using as my purpose. My Mimi has gone through a lot. My dad was her youngest son. She had 4 boys. She lost my dad and her husband within a year.
Oh man.
That's devastating.
Yeah, seriously.
And then her oldest son's wife just died. That's also devastating. And she had a very easy life growing up, and it became very, very hard later on. Whereas my grandmother had a very hard life growing up, and now it's easier going forward. It's really interesting to see how these women go through life and show up for their families. Like my grandmother is extremely reserved. She won't leave her house, but my Mimi, before she was very reserved, wouldn't leave her house. She's actively going out, visiting her grandchildren. She has like 12 grandchildren, like driving around, going to see them. And my Mimi showed up at my apartment and she's like, I made you dinner. I was like, you made me dinner? She's like, yeah, I made you dinner. Here you go. And she just left, which she's very reserved, but that was a show of love,
Yeah,
compassion, which I recognize and I'm very appreciative to. The purpose of this podcast is to identify trauma, how we can help heal ourselves and help others. And the saying of the podcast is trauma is not who you are, but it's what you go through. What do you think of that saying that trauma is not who you are, but it's what you go through?
Ooh, it's awesome. I think about that a lot too, because like props, for example, you've been through so much yourself, and your family's been through so much, but it's like you've transmuted that into this, right, into this project, which I think is really awesome. And I think in general, it's good to keep in mind. It's very. I always think about that. It's like how much have I just been shaped by my experiences versus how much is just me. You know what I mean? What am I left with after having gone through so much or going through, different things and coming out of them a fundamentally different person. But just like, even though the challenges themselves, there's nothing to romanticize about the challenges themselves. They're horrible experiences are horrible. You know what I mean? There's no toxic positivity looking for silver linings there sometimes. Sometimes it's just this sucks. But to come out of it maybe with a different skill set is I don't know. It's interesting. It takes a lot out of you, but all that is to say, I think it's a great saying. And it's easy to get lost in one's trauma sometimes and let it completely define someone. And I can't blame anyone for that happening. But yeah,
Have you experienced what you take as trauma?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm trying to think like, it's like, I'm here to talk about linguistics and stuff. But yeah, I've had my fair share of stuff for sure. I mean, I've trying to think, go through, I've had some deaths in the family, all that, I got pretty freaky stuff going on, but you know, it's all good. I've come past it too, you know what I mean? And maybe in much different situations, but I definitely feel in that in family is a sensitive topic, right? And yeah, I think it takes a lot, and I have so much admiration for so many people in my family for what they've gone through and the love they've been able to show me without even being able to appreciate it when I was a kid. So yeah, it takes a lot out of you, but they've made their what they've been through into something very precious, and that makes me think, I'm like, okay, well, who am I? You know what I mean? I can give this a shot too. Yeah, it's good.
If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
Yeah, I'm 20 myself.
You're 20. I am 23.
Nice.
Cool. So, are you in college?
Yes, I'm in my senior year right now of college.
Vibes. Good for you.
Thank
Proud
you,
of
thank
you. You've made it this far. Keep going.
Indeed. Cheers.
Cheers, my dude. But yeah, I think another huge stigma for discussing trauma is that older generations look down upon younger generations for saying that they have trauma. And I've witnessed it a lot. because with this podcast, yes, I am a very young person. Yes, I'm young. So that doesn't mean that I haven't gone through a lot in my life, right? I had a lot of abuse as a child that I never recognized was abuse until I started doing research for this podcast and started interviewing other survivors of abuse about their childhood trauma. Now, I'm the oldest of 3. I have 2 younger brothers. They're all adults now. They've told me not to mention their names, but if you can go back on some episodes, you'll probably find their names. Sorry, bros. But me and my brothers, we're mixed race, and I have struggled with that all my life. Not the fact of me being mixed race, but where do I fit in to like the categories of whatever. And you know, my dad's family is from Jamaica. My dad is a first generation American, and I still call myself a Jamaican because that's what I associate more with rather than just plain old American. Because I was raised mostly by my Mimi and Papa, who are Jamaicans. I can speak in a Jamaican accent perfectly. If you want, I can start doing it now. But when I think on my family and on the things that I've been through, it's really interesting to know, okay, that time that I was locked in my room for 2 days without any food or water, that's abuse.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah.
That's neglect. Neglect is abuse. That time, I let out my uncle's hunting dog on accident, and my papa grabbed a stick off of wherever and started beating me with it. That's abuse. I still have imprints on my ass from the
God
scar
damn.
tissue of how hard he was hitting me with that stick.
God
That's
damn. Yeah.
abuse. Like, me and my siblings not being able to eat because there was rotting food in the fridge because my mother would not leave her bedroom for 2 weeks. She had her own fridge in her bedroom. She would not leave her bedroom for 2 weeks. We did not get any food except to walk over 2 miles to Mimi and Papa's house to be fed. That was abuse.
God damn. Yeah.
And people in my family, I'm not going to name names, will be like, "Oh, you didn't have a hard childhood. What are you talking about? You had a fine childhood. You were not raped. You were not screamed at." Yes, I was. Like, just because you do not witness the abuse happening to another person does not negate their experience.
Totally. Yeah.
And coming back to all of that, as in my 23rd year of my life, which, you know, my half birthday is in 2 days, so I will have had
Hey.
a whole half of year of being 23. Then 23rd year of my life, I recognize that little me had experienced a lot and was not allowed to speak about what she was experiencing. And she was very scared all the time. She was very scared of how she could feed herself and her little brothers. She was very scared of all the responsibilities that she had. My mother was a hoarder. The house was in disarray constantly. How has that been transmuted into me? I cannot live in any form of chaos. If there is any mess anywhere, I start to have a panic attack and I clean. This means friends' houses. This means grandparents' houses. This means anywhere that I go to, even if it's a restaurant. If I see trash on the ground, I'm going to pick it up because little me got screamed at constantly for messes that were never my fault. And I bring this all back to your words matter. How I speak to myself now matters because I do not have my dad anymore. My mother is out of my life for very good reasons. I am an orphan in all forms of like the word. I consider myself an orphan. How can I reparent myself and choose kindness towards myself, even when I make a mistake, even when I fail myself? How can I pick myself up, dust myself off, and show myself compassion and grace? And speaking to those listening, do you ever think about little you and show little you some love and compassion? Do you? Do you show yourself joy when you succeed at something you thought you may not have been able to succeed? Do you show yourself empathy when you're struggling on maybe an assignment, maybe at work? You say, hey, that's okay if we don't get it. We can figure it out later. I'm trying to, this is my business, Trauma Dump Podcast. I'm an LLC. Like, I'm trying to get this little business off the ground. It's a lot of hard work. But just because I'm not getting a lot of views doesn't make what I'm doing a failure. Does it make what I'm doing a non-success? We need to rethink what success means for us, because success is very individualistic. Now, Griffin, I'm going to ask you this question. How can we prevent misunderstanding when talking about our mental health?
Ooh, yeah. Well, thanks for sharing, first of all. That was
Vibes.
plenty. Yeah, vibes, totally. But props. To just, I wish I had like a concrete answer, because I try to figure that out myself all the time. But I think even just words are big, because I think it's a great avenue to show that you at least establish like a modicum of care. You know what I mean? If you're like, if you lead in like with a slur or something, or some like term from the 50s, when like, and when you're trying to talk about mental health, I think the everyone in the room is at least going to know, they're like, okay, even whatever this person's intentions are, they don't really care about making people feel safe. You know what I mean? They don't really care about, it's going to be an uphill battle from there, right? If you actually have something serious to say rather than something inflammatory. So just to prevent misunderstanding, I think just to words are very useful tools, in that they can establish, where you find yourself in the situation. They can establish a sense of respect that, but it takes work to do that, and if you put in the time and effort to show that at least respect, then you can go from equal footing. Then you can actually have a discussion. But if you go in there with a smirk, you know what I mean, about mental health, or with a sense of, like, okay, yeah, like, like any of that, yeah, exactly the attitude I'd probably try to convey. But you won't get it. There will be no understanding there, that there's a fundamental disconnect there. If you're trying to help someone out, and you go into it with judging them, it's like, oh, okay, well, so that's what I would say about it. But I'm definitely far from I'm a linguistics person, definitely not a mental health person, as far as my area of expertise. But those are my 2 cents for sure. That's what I try to think about anyway.
Yeah, I think so many people see anything with mental health as it's an us and them thing,
Totally.
and
Yeah.
are just craving that conflict so that they can be right.
Mm-hmm.
Mental health is not something we need to be right on, or there's definitely a wrong, but there's no huge like, this is what's right. We're humans. We're ever evolving, ever learning, ever changing, ever growing. And we just got to keep catching up with ourselves, honestly.
Totally.
And I know you're like trying to give that disclaimer, like, I'm I know language, I don't know about mental health, but you do, because you know what feels right for you when someone is talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
And someone is trying to cause conflict, which, before I asked you on the podcast, I saw one of your little ditties, your little dudes, your
Yeah.
little videos about, let me find the word, but it intrigued me. I was like, oh, this is going to be a good person to have on the podcast. Hold up. Okay. Lord have mercy on this world. Okay. There it is. It's profanity.
These videos can have a lot of
This one.
some discussion about some very
Classic.
problematic issues.
You gave like a little disclaimer of just like, we're going to talk about profanity. It's like, this is good person to have on there, because in your comment section, there's a lot of people, first of all, given like they're in love with you vibes, but a lot of people are trying to have a conversation with you and you're actively responding to them. So I was like, this person wants to have a conversation about whatever. And I really appreciate that, because a lot of content creators just post something, and they don't respond to
Right. Yeah.
comments,
Yeah. For
don't
sure.
engage with their audience. And I really appreciate that you do. And those are the types of people that I want to have a conversation with, because when it comes to mental health, I will never know everything. I don't intend to know everything, but I intend to learn more every single day and become more informed, so thereby I can understand myself. Because I'm a complex case, homie. I'm wild. And I want to understand myself, understand others, and make something better than it was. And it's going to take some time. And we're young. We're in our 20s. The fact that we are trying to comprehend the world more and more each day is honestly props, because there's so many people that just ultimately give up. They're like, it's too hard. Why would I try? When I try, I just fail. And I feel like those of us that have gone through it, have overcome, or are in the process of overcoming, need to reach out to those people that are struggling. What would be your advice on how to speak to someone who you can tell is actively struggling?
Yeah, good question. Oh God, I've been in that position before too. It's always it's very difficult. I always get caught up in, ironically, exactly what to say. But I found that, I think of the times even that I was struggling, people reached out. I never really remember what they say. I pick up on the gist, but the fact that they reached out to me and said anything at all, or stepped in, was like, "Hey, like, are you good?" That's really, for me, that's what I remember, and I always try to keep that in mind when I reach out to people, because I'm like, I'll spend days formulating like the right text to address everything in the most, which is, which I think is good. I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do at all, but just even just to send like, hey, thinking of you. Yeah, and then maybe if they want to discuss, you can discuss, but just to be present. In my opinion, or at least in my experience, that's what I found is, for people to feel heard, for people to feel like someone gives a damn about me. That's all it really takes. Yeah, I don't know. That's my advice. Just give a damn.
Yeah, just give a
Send the
damn.
thing. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And something that we're learning in our Discord server is, that's also a really great thing about the podcast, is we have a Discord server where anyone can anonymously share what they're going through and provide peer support to others. And so it's honestly one of the best little think tanks ever, because we have so many different channels of discussion about different types of mental health. But one of the things that we have found that works is asking, how can I support you? It's asking, do you need someone to tell you that sucks? Do you need someone to commiserate with you and just be like, do you need someone to give you advice?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you need someone to just listen and heart your message, and you know that you've been heard? Because for me, most of the time I don't really need advice. I can figure it out on my own. Most of the time I just need someone to listen and to agree with me that, damn, that's shitty. Damn, that's super shitty what you went through. I'm really sorry that you went through that. Because most of the time, I can figure out what works best for me and put that plan into action on my own. But I do tend to stew in my own angy feelings about certain things. And until I get like validation is not a negative thing. For those of you like out there that think, oh, you need validation. Yes, we as humans do need validation. Okay. We are social creatures. We do need validation. That's the whole reason why shame exists, right? Because that feeling of shame when you do something wrong means that you cannot fit in with the herd. Therefore, you're going to be left out. So we have that feeling of shame so we can be remorseful, we can be forgiven, and then come back in. That's why we developed the feeling of shame. But we do need validation to continue on functioning properly. And for me, that validation is just someone saying, dude, that sucks. Yikes, bro.
Yeah.
Yikes, homie. And I don't need anybody to be, okay, you should do this, this, this. Because what works for you may not work for me. I just need someone to say, damn, bro. Bad vibes all around. That person, bad vibes. I'm
Yeah.
sorry you had to deal with that person. That person was bad vibes. And then eventually I will come to having empathy for that person. And it's the same thing with my mom. My mom has done shit to me my whole life. Bad vibes. But
Bad
now,
vibes. Yeah.
now speaking directly like to my grandmother, her mother, learning how my mother grew up, learning how my mother interpreted the world, learning that my mother is extremely codependent and does not know how to function on her own. It makes a lot of sense for the decisions that she has made. Does that mean that I like forgive those decisions? No, it means I acknowledge them and I move forward. No one has to forgive. You don't have to forgive someone. What we should instead do is acknowledge what that did, how it hurt us, and then choose the next path forward that is best for us. I am so sick and tired of people saying, oh, you need to just forgive them and move on. No, because forgiveness is a 5-step program. You acknowledge what happens. Like, say you and this person have a tiff.
Mhm.
Okay, this person slaps you in the face. Ugh. First and foremost, you need to acknowledge what happens. They need to acknowledge what happens. Okay? They need to apologize for what happened. They need to take steps in place so that thing never happens again. They need to prove that they are capable of change. And then you need to bring them back into your life and have a relationship with them. That's like the basic steps of forgiveness. You cannot actively forgive someone who constantly hurts you, betrays you, belittles you, and does not show any remorse for it, does not apologize, does not make the steps to get better. And that is why I don't have a relationship with my mom. Because I've acknowledged what she's done to me. I've told her what she's done to me. She will not acknowledge it. She will not apologize. There's no step forward. And for those of us listening, forgiveness is a word, yes. It has so many different meanings to so many different people. Maybe if forgiveness to you is just moving on from someone and letting it go, that can be your version of forgiveness. But from my own experience, forgiveness is a 5-step program. And if one of the steps is missing, forgiveness cannot really exist.
Totally.
You know, that's why. Don't have a relationship with my mother. That's why I consider myself an orphan with a living parent.
Right. Yeah. Because effectively, yeah, that's brutal though. Bad vibes for sure. So my condolences. But
Bad vibes for sure. I really want to make like a t-shirt that says like bad vibes for sure. Something. Because it's
Something like
honestly,
that.
I would wear the hell out of that t-shirt. I love graphic tees. But yeah,
You
it's
gotta own it. Yeah.
it is what it is. So how are you feeling right now, Griffin? How you doing?
I'm ace. I'm good. Well, I'm not ace like asexual, but yeah, I'm awesome. I'm doing good. Yeah. I'm happy to be here. It's a good day.
It's a good day.
Uh,
You about to go on an airplane?
About to go on an airplane, indeed, after this. Yeah, so excited for that. Love airports. Not really, but yeah,
Where
no,
are
it's
you
good.
going?
Going back to Chi-Town, Chicago, Illinois. So that'd be cool.
That's where my partner's family lives.
Ah,
His baby sister and his mom and his stepdad.
okay.
I've never been to Chicago. He lived in Chicago for like 2 years. I really want to go to Chicago,
Yeah.
TBH,
Yeah,
because I want to see it, but I have no money.
exactly. That's tough. Yeah, it's not so easy to just go from Dallas to Chicago, unfortunately. But if you ever get the
No,
chance, incredible city.
yeah,
So
I'll hit you up and be like, "Sup, bro? Sup,
absolutely,
homie?"
absolutely.
So going forward, how can I actively support you in what you're going
Yeah.
through?
Oof. I'm actually I'm in the great position to say there's not much I'm going through right now. I'm in a very solid place in my life, honestly. So I appreciate that. But I'm good. Honestly, I feel really supported. I'm really grateful to be able to say that. But definitely it came out of a, pretty tough few months, but now I'm like, it's good.
You ready
Um,
for what life has?
yeah, maybe. I know if there's any constant in life, it's that it's unexpected, I feel. But I'll take that. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty solid going forward.
So, speaking directly to our listeners, what would be your message about changing our personal vocabulary when discussing mental health?
Yeah. Okay, you know that childhood saying, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Um, words, language is a social construct, right? And I feel like people will throw social construct around and they'll interpret that as it doesn't matter. But we say like gender is a social construct, sex is a social construct, race is a social construct. Those are really important, right? We're social we we're social beings. What is so much of the human experience is the people you interact with. So words are extremely important. Words are your connections with people when the people you have to fall back on. That's life, like that. So never let anyone discount the importance of words to you, and never let anyone try to tell you like, oh, it's just words. You know what I mean? Like, why do you don't get all upset? It's just a word. Like whatever. Why do you care so much? Don't ever let someone try to tell you that, because it's a weak thing to say. It ignores the fact that words do have a lot of power. So I always just try to keep that in mind and maybe lead gently, and because it's very easy to just like you can pick up a stick and do some damage. And it's pretty easy to do damage with words. Like they have power. So that's what I'd keep in mind.
Yes, definitely. Words do have power. Another childhood saying, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Okay.
Not a bad one. Not a bad one.
Do you
Has its
have,
moments.
yeah. Do you have any resources or recommendations that you'd like to share with us?
Ooh, so I've got one, just if anyone's curious. I do think a pretty interesting article I've always go back to for this. It's called The Power of Language, by Margarita Alpheim and Katja Ehrenberg. If you look up like Power of Language Margarita, you'll probably come up. Not Margarita like the drink, but with a D. These two, I believe, German authors, they went into it, but it's about basically what we've been talking about this whole time, the power of language, and not only context of psychology, but they get into grammatical gender and also like politics around the Syrian civil war and the way that immigration was talked about. Yeah, very interesting stuff. But definitely check that out if this is something that interests you.
Yeah. So where can the humans find you? Where can they find you on the
Yes.
internets?
Me, I have no internet presence. I am, I no, I'm at Words at Work on TikTok. I do linguistic stuff. I'm also at SAPA, SAPA on Spotify if you're into music and all that. But I think my main hustle is probably TikTok at this point. So yeah, if you like linguistics, check me out. And of course, give the Trauma Dump podcast a big old follow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. You did great. It was awesome.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Grace. Yeah, it's thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Today's memes of the week from our Discord are right here if you're watching us on YouTube. Let's get into those memes. forge a strong community, so please don't hesitate to join our Discord to share with others and for podcast updates. In the Discord, we have so many different channels of discussion that include more than just trauma. We wish to create a place where you can be heard, so please don't hesitate to join us. You are needed and appreciated, and I'd love to meet you, know you, and support you in whatever way I can. At the end of every week, we spin our wheel of emotions to learn a new feeling and how it correlates to trauma. So here's the wheel. Let's zoom into the wheel. Oop, that's good enough, right? Wheel, boom. Ooh, it landed on interested, inquisitive, amazed, which is in the happy category. We don't get very many happy category emotions, which that's fine. I made this wheel like myself and I based it off of my therapist wheel. It's made out of metal. Joey drilled a hole in it and then we put the spinner on it. So we landed on originally interested, amused, inquisitive. When it correlates to trauma, I'm really interested in learning more about how our words affect. You know, I grew up in a very conservative Christian household and I listened to a lot of TobyMac. Fun fact about me is that I actually sang on stage with TobyMac when I was really young. I'll link it in the description. I sang in front of like 10,000 people with TobyMac and Mandisa, which was a lot of fun. For those of you that don't know, TobyMac is a Christian artist. He has a lot of hip hop, rap, pretty funky Jesus music, as he calls it. But he has a song that's called Speak Life. And it's based on a Bible verse of speaking life into like dead bones. It says in Proverbs 15:4, a wholesome tongue is the tree of life. In Proverbs 16:24, words are like honey, sweet to the soul and healthy for the body. And also Proverbs 18:21, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it eat its fruits. So whether or not you're a Christian, many different religions agree, and even science agrees, that if you speak kindness to something, it will flourish. But if you speak hatred, anger, resentment to something, it will diminish, it will wither away. It's the same thing with plants. So, and I'll link the study in the description, but if you speak kindness to a plant, it will flourish. If you speak anger to the plant will wither away and die. It's the same thing with water. If you speak kindness, empathy, compassion to water, it remains pure. But if you speak hatred, resentment, anger, bitterness to water, it starts to become corrupted. It's crazy, but words have power. I am so interested to learn about myself, how the words that I say to myself will help me or harm me. I know there's a thing as toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is when you ignore the negative just for the positive. But when you truly start to see the positive in everything, and not to negate the negative, but just to see the light, not just the shadow, to reframe how you see things can be extremely beneficial to your well-being, your growth, and your healing journey. I know it has been extremely beneficial to mine. When I was in the depths of despair with the loss of my father and my grandfathers, I neglected myself. But when I started to show myself compassion, understanding, empathy, I'm growing now. I'm making this podcast. I'm being productive in the ways that I am able, and I am appreciating myself more for the hard work that I do. Yes, I have gone through a lot. but that doesn't mean that I'm not still capable of going through a lot better, that I'm not still capable of finding joy in the little things. And I think you are capable too. Special thanks goes out to all of our Discord users. Thank you guys for being a part of this journey. Thank you guys for providing peer support to one another and seeking support for yourselves. If you'd like to support our podcast, we have a Patreon. Different tiers can get you a bracelet like these, which is handmade custom bracelets made by me, Grace, or you can support us over on Bonfire, where you can get custom apparel designed by yours truly. The links are in our description. Any support helps us out a lot, so if you feel compelled to, please like, share, subscribe, and continue to join us. Continue to listen. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Remember, you are capable of a fulfilling life in spite of your circumstances and your trauma. May you rise again from the ashes and be filled with peace, hope, love, joy, and understanding. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.